for Friday, July 24th to discuss the CARES Act funding. And to start with, I'd like to ask Commissioner Harvey if he would offer our invocation, followed by the Pledge of Allegiance by Commissioner Goddard.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We all bow our heads. Gracious Heavenly Father, we thank you for an opportunity today to serve our fellow man here in Putnam County and throughout Florida. Father, we have deliberations that need wisdom directly from your throne room today. Father, let us be decency and in order today. And Lord, let us just get our thoughts and our opinions across in a positive manner. And Lord, let's just move Putnam County forward with all the things we say and do. In Christ's name we pray.
Please join me in the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic which is
one nation
under God,
indivisible,
with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Commissioner Harvey, and thank you, Commissioner Goddard. We're going to move straight into public comment. This portion of the agenda is designed to allow citizens an opportunity to bring matters to the attention of the board. It is not reasonable to expect that the board will engage or debate in deliberation about matters on which the board has received no prior information as part of this agenda. The public is encouraged to watch on YouTube Live or by sending an email in advance of the meeting to BOCC meeting comments at putnam-fl.com. Please include your name, address, and phone number with your email. Ms. Parsons, do we have any comments as of this time?
No, sir.
Okay, thank you. Then we'll move straight into the item number 3, the 3A, the CARES Act. Just to let the commissioners know that we have Scott, Valerie, and Matthew from Wood O'Brien on the line with us to try to help us answer any questions or start the process. I'm going to turn this over to Administrator Suggs to start the presentation and let him take it from there. Yeah. Yes, it's 937-3563. Does anybody know who that might be? It says ME on it.
That's the Department of Health. That's Ms. Foster calling in.
Okay. Okay, I let them in the room, so we're good. Mr. Suggs, would you please start the presentation or whatever you're going to do, sir?
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, commissioners. There's a few items we were asked to kind of put a list of discussion topics together based on the request of the commissioners, and we've done that. There's about 5 items that we've got a lot of consensus on, and that would be, number 1 would be your local businesses. Then you have municipalities, Office of the Constitutionals, your county court system, and then any other county municipal related expenses due to COVID. But just recently, Mr. Chairman, as recent as the last day or two, we received some additional information that we would like to share this morning with the board. We've got notification that DEO has opened up another grant process. It's a community service block grant, and it is to assist people in their rental and mortgage issues. So it's another pot of money that is that's out there as well, that we're now in the process of researching and seeing how we might utilize those funds as well for our community. And we'll bring back more information on that as we get it. The second one, sir, was the Florida Housing Corporation. It's also tied to your SHIP program. It's the acronym for that one is CFR. And it's also a much wider a range for housing assistance, more like the SHIP program with upgrades to homes such as ACs and things of that nature, roofs and all that. So we're going to look into that a little bit further as well and see what we can do to assist through that. But the big news this morning that will affect all of us on this call, the county as well as our municipalities and constitutionals, is we received notification yesterday that the Florida Department of Emergency Management is going to be revising their Category B on their funding, our PA funding, our public assistance funding, and it's looking like it's going to be a decrease in those eligible costs. We don't have anything official on that as far as the guidelines. However, as soon as we get that, we will certainly forward that to not only the commissioners, but also our external partners, our municipalities and constitutionals, so they can be prepared for that as well. And so that in itself is going to probably impact where we are on the CARES Act funding. Those eligible costs we thought we were going to be receiving from FEMA is going to be decreased, and which is going to now, end up being a part of the CARES Act funding. I'm quite confident with all the municipalities, constitutionals in the county. That's where we're at, sir. I've got my team here. I got Miss Julianne, Jim, Tabitha, Sam Sullivan, and Laura Parsons here. So I'm going to turn it over to the team, and Julianne will start out with any questions or comments that need to be made and where we're at in the process today.
Thank you, and really we'll address your questions individually as much as possible. Since our last update, we have had a initial meeting with our CARES Act consultant that's been engaged. That CARES Act consultant is working on some documentation for us to disseminate to our pass-through recipients. So your municipalities, your constitutionals, any of those metrics. And we that will allow us to unify what we're getting back from the constitutionals and municipalities, and allow us to then assess it in a more appropriate manner with relates to what's eligible and what may not be eligible. So Witt O'Brien is compiling those documents, and they also are going to provide us a policy guide that they internally have used with other agencies that answers some more detailed questions about what is going to be eligible under CARES Act and what isn't, especially with respect to payroll, because that seems to be a common question for all of our constitutionals, including the county and our municipalities. And so that policy guide and assessment forms or documentations should be available to us within the next few days. And then we are going to disseminate that out to the constitutionals and municipalities. Once we get that information back, we're going to have a more clear picture of where we are. However, as Mr. Suggs just announced, some of our municipalities and constitutionals, as well as the county, were heavily relying on FEMA funding to be our first pot of money, so to say, so that we then could maximize our CARES Act funds. With the announcement that the FEMA guidance as to what will be eligible is going to be reduced, their terminology would be there would be a much more narrow applicability of what can be claimed under FEMA. So once we get, and FEMA on a federal level has not released that new guidance. So we, to some degree, your municipalities, your constitutionals, and us are going to have to wait to some degree and see what that FEMA guidance, the new guidance, comes down and says, and then reassess what we all may be thinking that we're going to claim through FEMA and have CARES freed up for. So with those respects, that will affect us as a county significantly, as well as the sheriff's office. And I believe a couple of the municipalities have already claimed their FEMA dollars. So we'll have to assess that when we get some more information. With respect to the two housing.
Yep.
Commissioner Harvey, do you have a question, sir?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I do. It's real quick. And Julianne, I know it's kind of early in the process, but if FEMA is going to narrow their scope of expenses that are allowed, is the Treasury going to follow the same thing, or that might be a question for Witt O'Brien, or it might just be too early to even ask that question? Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Harvey. And yes, sir, I'm certainly not sure that I can tell you what the Treasury is going to ultimately do or not do. It seems
matter from Witt O'Brien's. I don't believe it is. I think that what the difficulty here is, and I'll give you a primary example where FEMA is pushing back. Personal protective equipment, they're happy to participate in it under emergency protective measures if it's for frontline workers. But if it's just for traditional government employees that they don't consider to be frontline or contributing to emergency work. They don't want to participate in that PPE cost. That is an interpretation of their supporting emergency work, which is why they're actually tightening those restrictions a little bit. Is it still eligible in our minds? Yes, but that's the tack they're going to take. And it may be just unfortunately too long to fully arbitrate that before the end of the year, because the expenditure deadline for the Treasury money is the end of the year. So the Treasury guidance should remain actually just as flexible as it is now. I don't anticipate them putting any additional restrictions on what is and is not going to be eligible.
So if I'm understanding the answer to that question, Leanne, it would be that somebody has two of them going, but anyhow, it would be that the FEMA pod is going to narrow, but the CARES Act hasn't narrowed any at this point. Is that what I'm understanding you were saying?
Yes, sir.
That's what I heard.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
And
so if that turns out to be the case, then it would be that we would need some of the CARES funding to pay for the frontline PPEs that are not considered frontline by FEMA. Is that what I'm understanding?
yes, sir. So obviously our initial goal was to claim everything we could under FEMA so that we weren't taking out of the pot of money of CARES. But obviously as FEMA revises what they're going to allow, then that money is going to have to come out of CARES, because we're going to have a more narrow route via FEMA.
Okay, well, that's definitely good information to have for where this is going to go next in the conversation. Does anybody else have any questions at this time?
I have a question.
Yes, Commissioner Rawls.
How much money has been spent to date? The money that we're talking about from our county, not constitutional, it's just BOCC and EOC. How much have we spent to date, or what do you estimate our expenditures are to date?
Commissioner, at this point, I could give you a guess, but it is legitimately a guess. It would be probably more prudent and responsible for us to run a financial report on that, or have the clerk's office run it, so that we're not working off of information that could very possibly be inaccurate.
Can I get a breakdown of the expenses thus far? Give me a categorized list of expenses so I can take a look at this and start getting ahead of it.
Can help us with that relatively easily. They're very helpful in that respect. So I will work with, I'm not sure if Ms. Frank's on the line, but the clerk's office can help us get that to all of you.
You think we're less than $1 million?
Yes, sir, I do.
Okay.
But again, I do not want to back down into a number, because it was.
No, I got it. I'm good. If you give me a detailed list, I'd appreciate it.
We'll give you a detailed list of our expenditures, and also of any revenues or any funding that we've received to date as well. So we make sure that we're not double dipping or actually looking at expenses twice. So we'll make sure we do both of those.
That'd be helpful.
Mr. Chairman, for dumping this on you today, but we just got this information late yesterday, and it's going to really affect where we go from here. So especially for us in the municipals.
Well, I think it will affect it somewhat, Terry. I totally agree, but I don't know if this is going to be as serious as what we're thinking, because they may narrow the FEMA money some, which would take a small piece of the CARES Act on the end. So I just don't see where it's a life-changing event, what just took place. I'm assuming that when you give that information to Commissioner Rawls, you'll give him the FEMA tranche of money along with the money that's been spent, if any has been spent towards the CARES Act, because I don't know that much money has actually been spent towards the CARES funding as much as that has been towards FEMA to this point. So it would just be the matching funds from the county on towards the FEMA side. So, and I don't think the expenditures for the frontline PPEs that we're talking about, or the change in the frontline PPEs is going to be that big of a funding difference either. So kind of what I wanted to talk about this morning, Commissioners, is a week ago yesterday, the county received $3.2 million of this CARES Act funding. We have it. I'm not sure at this time. Maybe somebody on the call can let me know, but I'm not sure at this time. But I think the rest of that money is going to have to be spent on a reimbursement basis. So we would turn in the request for funding, and they would reimburse us for that funding if it met their program. I'm thinking that's the way it's going to go. And please jump in, anybody that thinks it's going to be different. Yes, Commissioner Harvey.
Mr. Chairman, the conversations that have had before, maybe Widow O'Brien can step in here now, but my understanding is if we came up with a plan, say we wanted to spend $3 million on something, we could submit that to DEM and they would approve it and advance our money to us, just like the 25% allotment. I don't know if that's gone away, but that was in the conversation, and that was part of the early conversation. So maybe Widow O'Brien can answer that question. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Go ahead, Matthew.
Yeah, I would say that hasn't been the case elsewhere. We have actually put together a spending plan for some other counties in the state, but they although the state has weighed in on the activities and determined them to be eligible or ineligible, or eligible with some caveats, they have not actually released any additional funding to those entities yet.
Okay. The main reason that I called a special meeting this morning, other than to try and get some transparency and some additional direction on this, and to have everybody be able to have questions answered by the consultant. I think the biggest thing is that I understand that it's a possibility that part of this money can go to a business program. It's going to be some period of time before the county decides, and the municipalities, and I'm certainly not trying to talk for any of them, but the municipalities have an actual program or what they're going to do or what have you. So it's been my understanding that we may be interested in doing a business program. And, you know, I think that the amount of money that has been offered to us, the $13.2 or $3 million overall, that's going to come to us in the future. But of that, $3.2 million has already been received and is in the bank account for Putnam County. It would be my recommendation and my wish that we could go ahead and come up with a business program for a portion, if not all of that money, and get that money to the businesses on the street that needed it or and we need to move forward with it. And then let the county and the municipalities and the constitutionals come up with their spending plan for the additional monies up and beyond the business program, that we could start with the money that we've already been given to us. And the business program, in my opinion, should not be just in the county. It should be for all municipalities and all businesses in all areas. And so we would just need to discuss criteria and what the maximum amount would be. And I did have a very short conversation with our consultants last week about a possible business program. And that business program, and they basically said to make it fit the CARES Act, there's one of the things that we can't do would be to spend money that was already reimbursed by another tranche of the CARES Act money. So in other words, we can't spend money on a PPP program, if my understanding is correctly, because they've already had a PPP program with another portion of this money. So, but their recommendation was for us. I think, to just make sure that our business program doesn't cover the same things as their business program, and make it open to people who did not receive a PPP loan. There are many businesses in the county that did not qualify for that because they didn't have any payroll, such as barbershops, beauty parlors, some restaurants in town, some different things that closed and had expenses because of COVID. So, you know, I would like to open the floor up for the thoughts from other commissioners on this type of a program, and do we want to go there, and when? Commissioner Harvey?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. question for Widow O'Brien, because I've had this as my number one topic for a few months now on my plan. Did I hear you say correctly, Mr. Chairman, that Widow O'Brien is recommending that if a business got PPE money, they could not get a business grant if we were able to do that? Is that what I'm hearing?
That didn't come from Widow O'Brien. That came from the original rules that we cannot spend this money on anything that has already been paid for by another tranche of the PPP, like the PP of the CARES Act.
Okay. Right, so let me, if I may, Commissioner, I'll clarify. So you just can't duplicate any federal benefits, and so an easy way to avoid a lot of administrative burden is to fund distinctly different activities than what PPP or EIDL pays for. So we know in the payroll protection program, 75% of it had to be dedicated to payroll. So as as mentioned, there are a lot of industries that didn't qualify for PPP loans or just couldn't substantiate that 75% payroll because payroll doesn't represent the majority of their expenses. Now, that's not to say that we couldn't do a payroll program or we couldn't do a small business support program that still pays for the same categories of expenses, but we will actually have to obtain information from each one of those businesses about the loan that they received and validate that they're not turning in the same receipts twice, basically.
Thank you.
Yeah, another mindset looking forward, because obviously we want to get these businesses or allow these businesses to continue to stay open. You can certainly help them with other activities like moving to touchless point of sale terminal systems or putting plexiglass in, any signage, any marketing campaigns to advertise that they're open again. There are a lot of things that those SBA programs can't pay for that we could pay for. And which would also eliminate any of that duplication.
All right, good. Thank you. Well, my proposal was pretty simple, and I'll just go ahead and say, and gentlemen, I have sent Mr. Suggs the Okeechobee CARES Act grant application. It's pretty thorough, in my opinion, what Okeechobee County did. But here's what I'd like to do. I would like to do $2,500 grants to each business, put $2.5 million up, and let's get that money out for exactly what you just said. Who was talking from Widow O'Brien?
Matthew,
I appreciate that. For mortgage, rent, utilities, inventory, point of sale, whatever. And if we had 1,000 businesses apply, that would be $2.5 million. And we could use the chamber and the Small Business Development Center to go through the questionnaires that Okeechobee County is using and to validate those people to get their money pretty quick. I'd like to see a turnaround. I don't want to bog this down, but I would like to see a turnaround as fast as possible. And I know Mr. Smith and I have spoke about that, and I'll let him speak or Susan on that, but I'm not going to put words in their mouth. But I would like for us to go ahead, if we do nothing more today, to go ahead, Mr. Chairman, as you suggested, let's get that money out to our businesses. And I think 2.5 million would be an appropriate amount. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I have no objection to that at all, Commissioner Harvey. In fact, I think that what we need to do is we just need to make sure that from Widow O'Brien that the things that we're asking this to cover are things that are being covered. I think we could also include with that a short affidavit that states that if you have received a PPP loan, that you are not using any of the funds from this money to cover any of the expenses for that, but for other expenses that are allowed. Because some of I don't really want to cut out all the utilities or any of that, because a lot of people weren't eligible for PPPs and they could use this towards that. So, I guess I'd like Matthew, if you could let me know, do you think that would be adequate to get someone that has received a PPP loan to sign an affidavit saying that they have not used any of the money because from PPP for the same items? And the reason I say that because the money from the PPP loans that now that they've extended it to 24 weeks instead of 8 weeks for payroll payback on the PPP loan, most people that received one are going to be able to use all of the funds received from that tranche of money for the exactly for payroll only. So as long as they don't double dip, would an affidavit from them be adequate for that or not, in your opinion?
Yeah, unfortunately not. You can use self-certifications in a lot of ways. This one is one where you want to actually at least know that there's some accounting for what the PPP loan went to. Since those are forgivable loans, they have a streamlined process for applying for PPP and demonstrating what they utilize that money on. So it's sort of an easy way there is just to get a copy of their forgiveness application, because it will outline all the expenditures to which they are actually applying for the loan to be forgiven against.
Okay, so if I'm understanding your answer correctly, then you're saying we still could include utilities and what have you, as long as they prove to us that from their PPP forgiveness that they didn't use any portion of that money towards that already.
That's right. I think that you give them the flexibility of saying, if you're going to use it for payroll, if you're going to use it for utilities or rent, which would have been covered by those loans, we need to know how you spent your PPP money. But if you're going to be paying for these other things that PPP doesn't pay for, we don't actually need to do that accounting. And we give them the flexibility of saying, well, okay, I'm still working through my PPP loan, so instead I'm just going to use this for this upgrade or this marketing, and it becomes a flexible pot of money for them.
Okay. All right. Does any other commissioners have any comments at this time? Mr. Pickens, I see you leaning up.
How many do we have any record of how many businesses we actually have in Putnam County might be eligible for this? You know, I know Commissioner Harvey said 1,000 and 2,500, but you know, what if it's 8? You could increase that amount. Do you have any idea of the amount of businesses?
Commissioner Harvey, did you have an answer to that, sir?
Well, I did. I talked to Dana yesterday, and she feels comfortable. The number is right around 11 to 1,200 that she can see right off the bat. A few years back, when we got rid of the business tax, there was over 3,000, but those were combinations and people working from home. They weren't all S corporations or 1099s or whatever the case may be. So I think she feels pretty confident that number is pretty close to it. It might be less and it might be more. We'll just have to see. But I think that's what we base on. If we can put 2,500,000 up, then if we get 1,200, we just do it that way. If we get 800, we might do more. I don't know the answer to that, but we'll just have to see the response at that point. Or we might just keep it at 2,500, even if we get 500 businesses apply, and we can always do a round 2 later on down the road if we needed to do that. So I think we need to be cautious right now. It's a lot of money. Some businesses have told me it's not enough for them and it's not going to help them, but I don't know if there is enough out there to help everybody. And we got a lot of people that we need to help with this money. So I think that's a start, and we'll just have to see what happens, Commissioner Pickens.
Okay, you answered one of my next questions, that there could be a round 2. Would they have to be, a S corporation, incorporated, or limited liability to apply for this, or somebody just working at home that doesn't have one? I guess, when you say working at home, how would they be exempt?
Well, Okeechobee County, if you don't mind, Mr. Chairman, they did a sole proprietor partnership, a C Corp, S Corp, limited liability, and a 1099 employee. Those were their four boxes. That actually there's 5 if you count the S Corp and the C Corp separately. So I think that covers everybody. In my opinion, I think that handles the real serious people, because not only did they do that, then they went on to Sunbiz to make sure they were really a licensed business in the state of Florida. They met their county or municipality building occupational licenses, which we don't have one, and they were a resident of the county. So in a certain time frame. So I think those are things that I think that covers quite a bit. I don't think we'll lose anybody through a net that way if we use that criteria.
Okay, and you said you think that the chamber would be able to assist. This is going to be a monumental task to try to get the checks to the people. Is that correct?
I actually talked to Dana myself, and Dana said that she would be happy to try to put together a group of volunteers from their members and board to come in and review that, be a application review committee, and send it on to the clerk with their recommendation that they fit or did not fit the criteria for the program.
Okay, was Cheryl Lynch's name mentioned also to assist with that? Is that a possibility?
I haven't talked to her, Commissioner.
I have, Mr. Chairman, and Dana would be glad to have any help she can get, she said.
Okay, the rest of the particular 3.2 million, what would happen to that? Is that, I guess, open for discussion, or would that be for backup in case it was 1,500 businesses and you didn't want to keep lowering the money? Because as Mr. Hart says, and 2,500 is a lot of money. It may not really help a particular business. They may be too far in the hole.
Yes, Commissioner Pickens, I think the amounts are still being discussed. That was a recommendation by Commissioner Harvey that I certainly had no problem with. But, this commissioner, I think, would rather either go ahead and say that we do 1,200 at the 2,500 that Commissioner Harvey suggests, or the 1,000 at 3,000, and spend and go ahead and do and take the $3 million of the $3.2 million that we've already received and get it into the hands of the people. Now that would just be my suggestion, but I will certainly go along with Commissioner Harvey's recommendation if that's what the board wants to do. I just think we need to get this going as quickly as possible, get it out on the street, get it into the hands of the people that need the money to survive. And there are a lot of them out there that are having problems with this. This would be an excellent help for. So I think it sounds to me like that most of us want to try to get this done. I'm seeing head shakes yes most of the way. And so I guess we just need to settle on how many of them and for how much money. And like I said, yes, Manager Holmes, go ahead, sir.
I want to comment before Don does.
Okay.
And then I'll yield the floor. I'm in agreement of that because it appears from this is that there are other avenues to get the money to the municipalities and maybe the constitutional officers and things like that. So this money looks like it's probably best prepared for or used to get it to the citizens for the businesses. So I'm thinking, and I know Commissioner Harvey has raised this, and you got to have some basis. So, but we'd rather go higher than lower and get the majority of the money out as soon as possible. So that's all I have. Thank you.
I got a question.
Yeah, hang on a second, please, Commissioner Rawls. The city manager has been patiently waiting for a while.
All I wanted to do was provide some information. I'm advised by our fire chief, building inspector, fire inspector, that we have roughly 600 fire inspections of commercial buildings in the city alone.
Yes.
That does include churches, but you've got about 600 just in the city of Palatka.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Holmes. Commissioner Rawls.
All right. So I agree with Commissioner Pickens. I think the money should be more, not less. I think we should be 5,000 to 10,000 and have the variable should be dependent upon the size of the business and the number of employees. Something we haven't talked about is landlords and people that are behind in their rents and mortgages. This money can be help with that as well, from what I've read. And if the landlords aren't collecting money, then they're eventually going to default on their debt obligations. So I think we should be considering them. right now we're only talking about 25% of the total amount of money, but if we committed to say 5,000 to 10,000 and we had 100,000 businesses, we're looking at between $5 and $10 million. The money's we're guaranteed that money as long as we can get it out before December 30th. Is that correct?
As long as it fits the program criteria.
Right. So I think we should set the bar higher. I definitely think we'll get more interest and be able to help more businesses. Question to Mr. Urchel. When is the effective start date of, so if COVID emergency starts in March and we're having this conversation on the almost the beginning of August now, businesses have already had to endure 6 months of this. When is the start date for, if they got the money today, can they go back and say, well, in April, May, and June, I maintained my employees, I maintained my rent payment, I was able to keep all my overhead paid. Here's my proof. Or does it start the day that they get the cash?
No, you can absolutely go back to March 1st. So March 1st would be the first day that you could reconcile some expenditures back to. And I think that would likely be for the individuals who didn't receive a PPP, because obviously, again, there is expenses there that could have been incurred. I want to be mindful of the administrative burden of trying to sort through those complexities and the potential of duplicating any additional federal assistance as well. So I maybe want to hear more from the chairman or some of the commissioners on what are the individual needs that you're hearing, and even if it's in an anecdotal way, what are your businesses telling you that they need assistance with that'll help them be a little more steady state sustainable?
So, what I'm hearing is you've got businesses that blew through a lot of cash that they had in reserves, which is why you set aside money for that. But being able to be sustainable going forward, you have to be able to have that money available. So if you blew through everything and your business slowed down, your revenues are decreased, you're not able to bring in as much cash. The goal here is to get people back to work, off of unemployment, get employers to bring their employees back. Bars and restaurants were hit especially hard in our hospitality. So I can't speak for something like the automobile sales industry. I don't know if they're doing good, bad, or indifferent, but I would imagine they've taken a hit. The federal government has interest rates. They're talking about negative interest rates right now. And I know that the USDA in particular lowered their prime lending rate to 2.5%. So the indicators are it's not all doing that great. And we need as much money out there as possible. So I haven't addressed seniors yet. And we have a lot of special needs people in Putnam County. Can this money be used in any way to help out seniors that have been homebound, that haven't had a chance to get out and do anything, that don't have any income? Is there anything we can do for them? And then I wanted to also talk about, folks like SMA. They work with mental health and substance abuse, and Meridian. From what I understand, we've taken a pretty hard hit on that because the folks that were in recovery and work on their sobriety, because there's been no accountability and no drug court, things like that have been taken off the table. We've lost traction there. I would imagine they're going to need some help as well.
Yeah, I'll address a couple of your items that you brought up there. Generally speaking, any sort of those programs that would be for elderly care, you mentioned homebound seniors. You can definitely conceptualize some programs that may be able to help them. So if it's adjusting some of the stressors that they may be experiencing, whether it be food security, obviously housing security may not be so much of an issue, but could be. If there's a social connectivity issue element to that, you could definitely explore some ideas on how to actually bridge that digital, divide of getting them access to some sort of social interface, even if it's virtually. There's definitely some options you could explore there. In general, community-based programs, as long as you can actually identify the indirect impact from COVID-19. So obviously those wouldn't have direct impacts. They would be as a result of the closures. They would be as a result of some of the economic downturn associated with the closures. So unemployment, individual housing security, food security, mental and behavioral health. All those items you can devise programs around. Absolutely.
Yes,
I'm not sure. The last thing I got, and then I'll yield the floor. Schools, schools were closed at the end of the year, and looks like we're going to be pushing out the opening. So that has another stress and strain on the families that had dual income. Dual income families have additional stress and strain having to have their children taken care of during the daytime while the parents are trying to work, where the schools used to provide that service during the daytime. That's not going to be the case going forward. Starting next month, we're talking 2 weeks, and it could be longer. So what has been done, or what could we do for those families and those children? And again, we're talking about food needs, emotional stability, and just the educational portion of it.
So I would say this is connected to the economic side of it, but childcare for first line or essential workers is another big component. So actually working with local childcare providers to see if you could provide some sort of additional assistance, not just so that they can practice safe childcare, but also potentially, subsidize some of the cost associated with that, so individuals can return to the workplace without being challenged by multiple obligations, right? That's definitely something you could pursue. On the food aspect, there are a number of federal programs available to assist individuals with food security. That's not to say that they're going to qualify for all of them, but what you may actually want to evaluate is working with a local area nonprofit who can actually help individuals connect with those federal programs. So a lot of those, more social services oriented nonprofits, they do a fair amount of case management, and they can bring that information to those individuals and let them know how they apply for those.
I was notified that the Christian Caring Center is offering their assistance. They have volunteers to do intake. So if somebody wants to take a note of that, Sheila McCoy reached out and said that she would love to help with this with her staff and her volunteers. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Commissioner Rawls, for your comments. Commissioners, I think that every program that Commissioner Rawls just outlined has value to it for sure. But every one of those different ones are a different program. So the only way that we're going to get started is to actually get started. And so that's the reason why I would like for the commissioners to come up with a program, because we don't have the resources to start 5 of them at once. So we need to decide what we want to do and if we want to move forward and how we want to move forward with one, while pursuing some of these other recommendations as part of the additional programs that are going to come. Commissioner Harvey, did you raise your hand, sir?
Yes, sir, I did. Thank you. And Commissioner Rawls, thank you for those suggestions. Let me say this. Those are some of mine on my list too. But at the same time, right now, if we as a board were to bite off a big bite of the apple at 5,000 to 10,000, and we had 1,000 businesses, we would have to go into our reserves to fund that, to get reimbursed. That's why I think we should just start at the 2,500 mark, and then we can do a round 2 if the board decides to do that later down the road. But I'd love to give all that money away, but there's going to be a lot of pull on that money. We saw that in some of the Palatka Daily News article today. There's going to be pull, and there's going to be people that need it, municipalities. So right now, though, the conversation is businesses, and I think we should focus in on that if we can. And let's look at if it's 2,500, if it's 3,000, but 3,000 only gives us 200,000 in reserves right now, and that's a concern of mine because we heard the narrowing of the FEMA. We might have some expenses there before we have to start spending our reserves and getting reimbursed. And that could take some time. So I would employ the board to really think about, I appreciate the conversation of the higher amount, but I think this is doable. And I think it's something we can manage and control. And I think when you see the grant applications that the other county has used, it'll really satisfy you at that point. So thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, yes, Commissioner Harvey, give me just a second, Commissioner Goddard. I I really do think that we could go into a full 3 million on this round, Commissioner Harvey, and the reason, and whether it be 1,200 businesses at 2,500 or 1,000 businesses at 3,000, that would certainly be up to the commission to decide. But I think we could go ahead and put up 3 million of that dollars, because we've been pretty much assured we're going to get the other. We've got funds in the county that we can borrow from other than spending our reserves towards it if it's a qualified program without incurring any interest. So coming up with if we need another couple of $300,000 or whatever to get through the EOC side of this and the emergency side of this and whatever, those funds are available within other funds in the county that until we were reimbursed from this CARES Act fund. So I don't think we have to keep a large reserve from the money that they're giving us. I think we can go ahead and spend up to 3 million of it, in my opinion. Commissioner Goddard, did you have something, sir?
Yes, sir. We definitely want to help everyone that we can, but we all know one size doesn't fit all. Some businesses operated even at a 50% level, but there were a lot of businesses that were absolutely shut down, mandatorily. Restaurants, bars, hair salons, daycares, those were shut down. I think that your initial, let's look at how many businesses. If $1,200, that's just a number, but if $1,200 that we can put in their hands immediately, and then look at these other ones on a base by base, because like I said, one size does not fit all. Some businesses are deeply hurt, some are just barely hurt. I think if we can get the money into their hands as quickly as possible, you'll start getting these people some help.
Okay, Commissioners, thank you for your comments. And that's what we're trying to decide right now, I think, is do we help 1,200 businesses at $2,500 a piece, and that's $3 million, or do we help 1,000 businesses at $3,000 a piece, which would be $3 million? That's kind of the decision that I need the board to discuss at this point, if possible, is how you would like to go. And if you agree or not, that we should go ahead and expend $3 million of the $3.2 million we got in a business program. And if we do, then I think now that we've already kind of set up the logistics of it to some degree with an application, and the chamber's going to try to help us do review and what have you, then at that point, how do you want to take it from there? Do you want to do? I need probably a motion and a vote. Do we do 1,200 businesses at $2,500 a piece, or do we do 1,000 businesses at $3,000 a piece?
I got a question.
Yes, Commissioner Rawls.
I'm really confused because when we first started talking about the CARES Act, I understood we were getting 3.2 million. Then I was told we're getting 12 million. But you just said we're not guaranteed the rest of it.
That's not what I said.
Are we guaranteed the 12 million?
I think we are, as long as we can produce programs that they'll either reimburse us or send us the money for. But as our consultant just made the comment, as far as he knows, nobody has gotten any more of the last 75% of the money. They're turning in programs and what have you, but it's probably going to be done on a reimbursement basis. If I understood it, is that what you said, Matthew?
Yeah. That was it.
That's correct, Chairman.
So we're not guaranteed the $12 million between now and December 30th. Is that correct, Mr. Urkel?
That's go ahead, Matthew.
Yeah, well, they have a funding allocation, and provided that you can actually submit the reimbursable expenses up to that amount, you have access to it.
So if we were to allocate $6 million, they would definitely reimburse us the other 2.8.
Yeah, we'll want to work with the state to understand exactly what the mechanism to obtain the 75%. They have not given definitive guidance on how they will disperse that, if it will be advanced disbursements or just strictly reimbursement. We're still waiting on that guidance. We do have the 25% now. And then that mechanism for obtaining the 75%, we're awaiting some additional guidance.
Wow. So this is just, this is very futile, to be honest with you. An overwhelming majority of our businesses are in the city limits of Plaque, and they're going to need the most amount of help. There's no doubt about it. But it's really hard for me as a commissioner to make a decision. I can vote on this today, but what do we tell the other folks that are waiting in the wings? We tell them we're just not sure what's going on, because we told them there was $12 million, and now I'm hearing that there may or may not be $12 million. Any idea how fast we can get a definitive answer on that?
Matthew, would you feel comfortable taking that?
The question itself, I think that we can go ahead and prod the state for an answer and let them know that we are devising a spending plan. I will share with you what other counties, they've developed a spending plan and submitted it up to the state, and the state has given their blessing on it. I think that would be a wise approach. We can do it. We can show that we've established what the different buckets of money are going to be, even if they are programmatic buckets. This is how much we're going to spend for each of the cities. This is what's going to go towards this type of program. And it can be malleable. We can adjust it as necessary, but it at least shows the intent to the state that we have a plan for this money and we need all of it.
What I would like to be able to tell the public is this. We spent $3 million, or we set aside $3 million today for businesses. That's our first step in a long journey. In the meantime, we're going to write a plan. We're going to submit it to the state that includes blah, 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 blah. Up to $1 million of reimbursement for Putnam County and the other agencies for their COVID response. And then show the public that we're able to get this money out to them in different areas. Because like I said, I know that domestic violence is on the rise as a result of this. There's all these different needs, but if we could identify those pockets and put them out there, I think it would make the public a lot more comfortable with our decision making.
Okay, and like I said earlier, Commissioner Rawls, I totally believe that every one of those, every one of the programs that you outlined earlier has validity. But we've got to figure out where to start, and do we start today, or do we not do anything until we come up with all these other programs?
No, I said we go forward, and I think Mr. Harvey should be the one to make the motion, but I say we go forward, but we also continue on as soon as possible, getting this plan written to the state and try to get it approved, and maybe have another workshop next week to discuss the plan.
Okay, well, when additional information is valid, then we will certainly call a special meeting at any time to do that. But it's got to be additional information. Commissioner Harvey?
Commissioner, Mr. Chairman, thank you. And I'm prepared to make a motion if we're ready to move into that arena.
I'm ready.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, I'd like to propose that we take $3 million and we put it into an account, and we help 1,000 businesses with that money using some type of a grant application that I saw today. But a $3 million for 1,000 businesses would give $3,000. That's my motion, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, we have a motion on the floor. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, we have a second motion by Commissioner Harvey and a second by Commissioner Rawls to set aside $3 million to have $3,000 grants. Under discussion, I see you turned on your video, Mr. Smith. Would you like to have a comment, sir?
I would. Thank you, sir. The application that Commissioner Harvey spoke of from Okeechobee County, could we get a copy of that for review, so that if there's any additional information that we need to collect on the front end for auditing purposes, so we would like to have that opportunity. Thank you.
Mr. Smith? Mr. Smith, I think I sent that to you, Mr. Smith.
Okay. Thank you.
I think that once we vote on this, if this is the direction we're going to go, I'm going to ask that our administration get with the clerk's office and come up with an application, a program, try to move this forward in the most expedient manner possible. And I'm going to ask that the board give me the authority to talk to Dana Jones and ask her, would she go ahead and get her review committee put together from from qualified people within the business community to help do this and send those applications forward to maybe back to the county staff, who would then send them to the clerk of court to also approve and cut the check. Is that okay, Tim? Okay.
I have a question on that.
Okay.
So is there, I'm just looking at the appearance of impropriety. It seems to me like having a group of business owners determine whether or not a group of businesses deserve to get money may have the appearance of impropriety. I'm just wondering if the SBDC, I know they have the ability to do it, if that might be a better venue to vet those and not have local businesses vetting local businesses. That's all.
Okay. Well, I don't really see the conflict there, but I think in part of this conversation and part of my conversation with Ms. Jones is that the SBDC would be more than welcome to come and join on this committee if they had the resources and the time and would do that. In fact, I think they would welcome that. And so if that being the case, then, I don't really see where there would be a conflict there. And I don't think that you could, if they weren't approving their own loan, I don't see where there would be a conflict either. I'm sure that the chamber would make every effort for that not to happen.
Well, you have chamber members, looking at chamber members, for instance, that could be a conflict in itself. I just, I think personally it'd be better to let the SBDC do the everything by itself. There's obviously no charge for it, and we wouldn't have anybody raising that question, because I've already had people asking. My initial thought was, what if the chamber was to get involved in this? Why not let them? And somebody brought that to my attention, so I'm just relaying it.
Were you trying to tell me that the SBDC wouldn't have any possible conflict of interest from any of the people that they've advised or helped get money for or supported their businesses over the years? Commissioner Rawls, I agree.
I think the SBDC, because they have.
Sir, I think it's my turn, and then I'll listen to you as long as you like.
All right.
Okay. I think that there would be a just as likely to be a conflict of interest on either side, and that's the reason I was for the two of them getting together and reducing any possible conflict of interest. Now, Commissioner Rawls.
So the difference is the SBDC has an anonymity agreement with each business. There is no information shared between businesses. In this case, it could be a business owner in Putnam County looking at a business owner in Putnam County. That's all I'm saying. It's very, very simple concept. I don't want to sit here and debate you on it. I just wanted to bring it up for disclosure. That's all.
Yes, sir. I wasn't trying to debate you on it, Commissioner Rawls. I was just trying to say that I think that both of them working together would be better than either one of them doing it apart. Commissioner Harvey, did you have another comment?
I was scratching my head. I'm sorry.
Okay. Commissioner Pickens.
Yeah, I definitely agree with the 3 million. I'm still struggling a little bit with the 1,000. You don't want to leave any qualified business out. Is there a possibility that we do have 1,500 and 5 would be left out for whatever reason? And Commissioner Harvey, I'd like a copy of the application for Okeechobee also. And a question to you is, do you know if it included agricultural businesses? And they could apply also, but I'm struggling with the 1,000. And there may be only 800 businesses in Putnam County. If there's 600 in Palatka, it sure seems like there ought to be more than 1,000 that would qualify for this.
Well,
yeah, Mr. Chairman, may I answer that?
Yes, Commissioner Harvey.
Thank you. Commissioner Pickens, yes, agricultural, sole proprietorship, partnerships, C Corp, S Corp, limited liabilities, and 1099s. Could we get more people to apply? Probably so. But I don't know where that number lies, since we don't have an actual county business tax anymore. So we're just going to have to start somewhere. And I'm fine with if you want to amend the motion where if 1,200 apply, but I'm a little concerned if only 500 apply and we put too much money out there at the front end. That's my only concern. I want to do something well, but I don't want to break the bank and not be able to come back at another time. So, and if there's 500 or another 300 that do it, then we can always come back and we ran out of that portion of funds, and we can come back and refund it if we want to.
Okay.
Mr. Suggs has those copies, and he'll be sending them.
So this
to
would
you.
basically be when this hits the street, first come, first serve, correct?
That's how I would see it, sir. Yes.
Qualifies. Okay.
Commissioner Pickens, if you're having heartburn over that, we could always accept an amendment to the motion to do 1,200 businesses at 2,500. And then we could, and then do like Commissioner Harvey said, or leave it as it is, and we could always revisit it if we had the money when the other care funds were available, or that we knew we were getting them for sure.
Do you think, I'm sure they would put a timeline on this. Would it be possible, and I'm just throwing this out, is to see how many applied? If we're willing to give up the 3 million and see how many applied, and if it's, a lower amount, we stick with the, $3,000. If it's a higher amount, we have to break it up a little bit.
Commissioner Pickens, Mr. Chairman, if you don't mind.
Just a second, if you would, Commissioner Harvey. Commissioner Goddard has been patiently waving at me over in the corner here. So, Commissioner Goddard, please.
All right. Well, I think maybe we do need to amend it and not just put 1,000 people. Let's just give it a timeline to apply. Take that number, divide it into the money we have, and that's what amount each business would receive. Because I can see Mr. Pickens' thing. You don't want it. What if we do have 1,200 businesses? You're cutting 200 out. I think if we give it a timeline, we'll see how many apply. First come, first serve, however you want to look at it. How many apply, and then take that amount, divide that into the money that we're going to have, and that says how much you're going to get.
Commissioner Harvey.
Well, Commissioner Goddard, you're right, and I'm not going to. Yeah, I think that's you and both Commissioner Pickens are thinking bigger. I'm thinking a little smaller. I don't think all the businesses in the county are going to rush and apply for it, because some of them don't need it. Some of them are doing fine. Some of them sales are more than they've been. It's hard to believe that be the case, but that's true. But I think my point is this. Let's just say that we have 1,200 and we're 200 over the mark. We can easily call a Zoom meeting, the chairman can, and the chairman's already put out there that there's money sitting back in other places that we could use immediately to fund that until we get our reimbursement back from the state. We know that we would get that back from the state because it's a reimbursable expense based on what O'Brien has already told us if we follow those guidelines. So I think it's just a matter of, we'll fund as many we'll fund 1,000, and if 1,200 apply, we'll be back on this call refunding that scenario. And I think no one gets left out. And actually the time slot probably wouldn't even be a hiccup in the road for them, because we can move that really, really fast. We'll know very quickly how many applications are coming in, and the chairman can call that meeting at any time. So we see we're up to 700. We might want to call that meeting and go, hey, we're getting close to our 1,000 people right now. But I think we got to start somewhere, and I don't want to reduce that amount by 3 million by 1,200 or 500 people with 3 million, and now we got more money. I just really think we need to start somewhere, and this is where. But I'll do whatever the board wants to do. This is a great conversation to have, is to be able to help our businesses. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Commissioner Harvey. Commissioner Pickens.
Yeah, I think it's a really good conversation, and we've never been in this situation before. It's just blessing that we do have some money that we can distribute. So I'm okay. I'm okay with the motion in the second. So we can always call another meeting to look at it and do something for the other businesses if it happens to be over 1,000. So I'm good.
Okay, as part of the motion, and I think we do need to put a timeline on it. I think we need to put a timeline that once the the mechanics of the program are put together and the application's on the street, that within 30 days, that they have until 30 days and then to apply for it. Does anybody have a problem with that? Yes, Matthew, please go ahead. I'm sorry, I see your hand waving now.
No, it's okay. I don't want to dive too deep into the program design element of this, but I want to actually have a conversation about ways that you could structure it to try to get some of that more representative parity. The Okeechobee application actually has a different funding amount for businesses that have employees versus those that are actually contractors or sole proprietors. So they have it set up as 7,500 and 5,000. I mean, is there some thought to doing it that way? That you would actually have those with business or employees actually are able to access more funding. And then similarly, their requirement is to limit it to businesses with 25 full-time. That's how they're defining small business. Is there some thought to how you want to define a small business within the community?
Okay. We'll have that conversation in just a minute, Matthew. Commissioner Goddard, did you have your hand waved, I see?
No, sir.
Okay, up in the corner of your picture there, I'm gonna take it away.
Oh yeah, I did that earlier.
Okay, well.
Yeah, I got a question.
Just a second, if you would, Commissioner Rawls. All right, go ahead. Yeah, go ahead, Commissioner Rawls. That'd be fine. Commissioner Rawls.
Hang on a second, my phone's ringing here. All right, back to my original question. Right now, we're dealing with 3.2 million. If we had a demand for 4.8 million, would we not 0.6 million in additional? If this program, I assume that when we're discussing one program right now, and my understanding was if we have a program that is acceptable to the state, we would be able to pull extra money out of the remaining 9 million. So is that not the case?
Matthew, could you take that question?
You're saying that if we would be able to access the additional up to $12 million, and that's my understanding, yes. Well, I think we want to develop a spending plan where we have a framework of it to get it up to the state, but then we need to work with the state to establish the mechanism of drawing that additional funds. And we can.
How long does this?
I'm sorry, go ahead.
To respond to these plans, how long is the state taking to respond to the plans?
Next door in Clay County, it was pretty quickly. So I think that we can get a response relatively quickly.
Less than a week, less than a month. What's quickly?
Yeah, I would say less than a week.
Okay, so I think based on what I'm hearing, I'm comfortable that if we're going to be setting a plan up based on businesses only, it sounds like. Is that correct, Matthew?
I think that we should develop an overall spending plan. So we should actually put some buckets of money, including some in reserve, to say that we're actually, should any of the programs need additional, we could pull, funding from the reserve.
Yeah. I'd like to see us get that done, because then we wouldn't be having this back and forth conversation. We would have the money allocated, and we'd be comfortable on being able to have the extra money, and we could set aside $5 million for businesses and dedicate 3.2 million with $1.8 million in reserves or something like that, and be able to have. I agree. Depending on the size of the business, some businesses are going to need more money than others, but we got to start somewhere. What have other counties done, Matthew, at this point? What has been there for this process?
Very much the same. As far as actually the spending plan, I haven't seen as many small business grant programs because there is some available at the state level. I think something that we need to be aware of is that there are ongoing conversations in Congress about standing up additional SBA programs in this next legislative package. So there is a risk that you duplicate further benefits. And that's why I think it is a worthwhile exercise to have some sort of scoring criteria that says if businesses have not been able to access any federal assistance up to this point, they are in the most amount of need. And so they would actually be able to access more funding than those businesses that may have actually been able to access federal assistance. The challenge is devising a small business program that may not duplicate future benefits, right? Because we don't know what Congress is going to do. But very well, within a couple of weeks, we might get a clear picture.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, Commissioner Harvey.
I concur with all that, but I think we just got to go forward at this point And Matthew, I appreciate that. I know what Okeechobee did. That's why I didn't make my motion in that time frame and that confines. But truly, I think we can adapt this little. It doesn't have to be Okeechobee. It could be Clay County. It could be anybody. And some of these counties have been doing it since March. The 12 counties that got their money up front. So I think we can make it very simple. Let's get this round of funding out to the businesses. And if we see that we need to do something better, we can easily, our chairman can call a meeting and we can do that. But let's go ahead and do something today. And Mr. Chairman, we do have a motion and a second on the floor. So when you're ready.
I'd like to allow Commissioner Pickens, he's been waving, to have comments if you don't mind.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to.
I just want to make sure I understand. So it's 1,000 businesses at 3,000 a piece, because there is some merit to what Matthew was saying about, you've got a business that was employing 5 people, 10 people, and then they're going to get $3,000, and you have a sole proprietor that works by himself is going to get $3,000 also.
Well, my opinion on that, Commissioner Pickens, if you may, is that somebody that has 8 or 10 people more than likely received a PPP loan that gave them 10 weeks payroll for free. So maybe it didn't help them completely, but they have had some help given to them, where the small businesses that didn't qualify for PPP haven't had zero help in this area. So I think I'm willing to do anything that you guys want to do. I just hope that we can do it today. And I'm hoping that I think we need to do just like they did at the federal PPP program, that we need to cap this at the amount of money that's set aside for it at $3 million today. And if we're going to do it for 1,000 people, like the motion states at this moment, for 3,000 apiece to $3 million, when the money runs out, we're just going to have to revisit it just like they did. And during this time, for Commissioner Rawls, this was also a conversation that was started last week in the opening meeting with Whit O'Brien, was that's the first step would be to trying to identify what we're going to spend the money on. So that is definitely something that we're going to work on, and they are working on. But while they were going through this motion, I didn't see personally any need to set this $3 million in the bank and not get it out to the business. That's the reason I called this meeting today, was to start this process moving forward, instead of just sitting on our hands waiting on sometime in the future to start a program. So, we have a motion on the floor. Is there any further discussion on the motion? And just to reiterate, it's up to 1,000 businesses, up to $3,000. And the staff is going to come up with the application process for it. Is that correct?
Correct.
I have a question on that. Is it 3,000 or up to 3,000?
It's 3,000.
Okay. So if you qualify, you get 3,000. That's it, Larry?
That's correct, sir.
Okay. So it's 3,000 even, Bill, or Commissioner Pickens. So in the application, I'm going to have to discuss that a little further. Thank you for bringing that up, Commissioner Pickens. Does that mean that a small business like a barber shop that had to close for 3 months, I think part of this, and Matthew, please kick in if you can here, I don't think we're allowed to pay back lost revenues. I think we're only allowed to pay expenses. So a small barber shop, for instance, that had lost revenues, but their rent was $500 a month. I don't know, $1,000 a month. Then they could probably do it for rent, and they probably didn't get a PPP if it's a one-chair barber shop. But I don't think we can pay lost revenues. Is that correct, Matthew?
Yeah, I think it's advisable not to. So the revenue replacement requirement is limited to government or public entities, but I think that that comes off as a stipend as opposed to an actual business interruption. So it would be kind of a distinctly different purpose than the business interruption is intended for. I think you do want to pay just expenses, but I think you do make it flexible that they can use this money going forward as well. That if there's something to help them adapt the delivery of their business to keep going, that they can spend the money on that to get back operating again.
Okay, well, are those the kind of rules that you're going to help us staff write, Matthew?
That's right.
Okay, thank you. Then I think that are you good that then Commissioner Pickens with the $3,000, because it seems like if they can do it from March 1st all the way to December, they can probably get there on their expenses.
Okay, I'm good.
Okay. Is there any further discussion on the motion? Hearing none, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Ayes have it unanimously. So, yes, Mr. Holmes.
If you're through with that subject, I have a different question, but I'll wait if you've got more discussion on this subject.
Well, I think we're probably going to have a little more, but go ahead, Don.
My question from a municipality perspective is this: from what I'm hearing, and I appreciate the opportunity to ask this question while you have your consultants on board and online. From what I just heard, basically a majority or all of the money that you've already received is going to be allocated to this business reimbursement program. And then the money from there, unless things change, is going to be probably money that's reimbursed to the county after the county advances it, unless, as the Widow Bryan representatives indicated, you guys get an approved spending plan and the state should advance you funds. So my question from the city's perspective is this: I assume that, probably I shouldn't have said it that way, but I would assume that the city will be submitting reimbursement for expenses to the county. And I guess my assumption is that the county is not going to advance those funds, but instead would be submitting that reimbursement request to the state, or would the county have to advance the funds honoring the city's request? Not have to, but should they choose to, would they advance the funds which funded the city's request, and then would the county then seek reimbursement for the state for the money that the county had advanced?
That's not my understanding, Don. My understanding is that the municipalities and the constitutionals are going to be paid on a reimbursement basis. So, in other words, if you went out and spent the money or whatever and turned it into the county would seek that reimbursement. If the county receives that reimbursement, then then the city or another municipality or constitutional officer would receive their reimbursement. But if the county doesn't get it back because it didn't qualify, I think the commissioners in our last discussion on this said that they didn't want, the county can't be the one that's left on the hook in the middle for any program between a constitutional and a municipality.
Well, I assume that was going to be the county's position. So that leads to my next question. Your Widow Bryan rep talked about the county coming up with a spending plan and forwarding it to the state for at least comment and approval, even if the state didn't advance the funds. So will a county accept a proposed spending plan from a municipality and forward that to the state for comment and or approval?
In my opinion, Don, the next step in this program would be to come up with that spending plan, which would include all the different programs, all the different monies requested from municipalities and what they're for, and the constitutional officers. And then the board's going to have to meet and vote on which ones of those programs that we're going to try and move forward and which ones of those items. Now, I think that's what we decided and what Matthew said we could do the other day, Mr. Urchel. Is that correct, Matthew?
That's right. And Mr. Holmes, I think our intention is to work with you to do exactly that, to understand exactly what your needs are, what the city's needs are, so that they can be part of the county spending plan. And obviously, we'll be able to aggregate all that information, bring it back to the chairman of commissioners to evaluate so that they can appropriately prioritize the funding based on the needs in the community. But working with you to understand exactly what the cities are thinking about doing or what they need to do to adjust and prepare is a piece of that spending plan development process.
So it wouldn't be a case of us submitting a spending plan and you forward that spending plan. It would be a case of us submitting a spending plan, or as you called it identification of needs. And then the county would consider that identification of needs in the overall context of all of your programs. And then perhaps you would submit a spending plan to the state that incorporated those of the municipality's needs, which you felt you were interested in funding. Is that kind of a sum?
I'll let the chairman and commissioners speak to it, but that is how we're doing it elsewhere. I think it allows the commissioners and the commission to evaluate the need across the county, not just their own county expenditures and the regional response, but certainly some of the individual and business needs as well.
Okay. Thank you for that clarification.
Commissioner Harvey?
Yes, thank you. And thank you, Mr. Holmes, for bringing that up. I do have a question, though. My understanding was the municipalities were going to do exactly what you said, Mr. Chairman, and submit their request. But what I just heard now is that we're going to loan them with O'Brien to kind of help walk through their request beforehand. Is that what I'm hearing now, Mr. Chairman?
I don't know that we're going to loan them to them, Larry. I just think that as part of any comprehensive plan that we come up with, that it's going to have to include all of the spending plans from the municipalities and the constitutional officers for us to see and vote on. And one of the main things that we brought Whit O'Brien for is to go over those types of requests to make sure that they fit within the funding criteria before we have to pay any of the money back. So I don't know if I would count that as much as loaning them ours, or as much as I would just saying that our consultant was trying to keep us in the right spending categories with the requests that are coming in.
Well, how I envision it, Mr. Chairman, and I see it both ways. Say the town of Interlaken produces a document and this is what they need for reimbursement. And Whit O'Brien looks over it and says, yes, all these will fit but one, and that one won't fit for this reason, and sends it back. That's what I would envision. But I can see it both ways, because we want as much input on the front end as we do on the back end, and to make sure that we're not going to be stuck holding the bag and paying the state back at that point. So I'm okay either way. I just was wanting a little clarification on that. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. Mr. Holmes, were you done, sir?
Yes, thank you very much. I appreciate the opportunity to ask that question.
No problem. Do any of the other commissioners have any questions concerning the process? I mean, Whit O'Brien and staff is definitely working on the process and trying to identify the different funds that are requested or needed for different areas, and then to bring back to the board at that time. So does anybody else have anything today?
I have a question for Mr. Urchel.
Commissioner Rawls, go ahead.
I have is Matthew on?
Yes,
I am,
he
yes,
is.
sir.
Okay, I've got a lot of latency, and I'm in a pretty poor area for Wi-Fi. So, how different is Putnam County than other counties? How many counties are you working with in Florida right now? Let me ask that.
4.
Okay, what counties are those?
Indian River, Pinellas, Clay, Putnam. Actually, next week we'll start working with Hardy.
Okay, so I've seen Pinellas County's plan and the work y'all do with them. How different are we going to be in ours than theirs? Because in reading Pinellas counties, it looks like we could just take out the Pinellas and put in Putnam, and it would work for us. But what is the difference?
Yeah, so the difference is that Pinellas is a direct recipient of the funds from the Treasury, so they don't have to access the funds from the state. And I'll give you an example of where the state has added additional restrictive criteria that doesn't apply to some of the direct recipients of funds. The state of Florida has taken the tack that the only payroll time that would actually be eligible represents overtime, which is a very emergency management FEMA focused lens of looking at this. But the Treasury guidance is actually a far bit more subjective about it and says that those that are substantially dedicated to COVID-19, and then they go further to say that if 51% of their time is dedicated to COVID-19, you can capture their payroll costs. But that's the state taking a very conservative interpretation of that guidance, whereas a direct recipient can actually choose where they lie on that risk tolerance, right? They can choose to lump more in as long as it's a defensible position and they're willing to take that risk, or they can take the same conservative approach. So their spending plan has that additional flexibility of they only have to answer to the Treasury. They also have 100% of their money sitting in the bank account right now. Whereas, counties like Hardy and Clay and Putnam and Indian River, they have to access it from the state. So you receive the first 25% of funds, and then you are developing a spending plan, and this is what I'm proposing, is developing this spending plan that looks very much like those other entities, but it appropriately prioritizes based on the needs, gets the state's view on it to demonstrate that you do actually have a plan for utilizing all of the money. And then, of course, we're going to have to, work with the county staff to aggressively push the position with the state to understand how that additional 75 is going to be structured, if it's going to be reimbursement based or if they're comfortable advancing funds. And I think the more confidence we can give them that the county actually has a well thought out plan for this and is capable of handling the funding appropriately, I think the more likely they are to advance the funds as opposed to holding true to a subrecipient reimbursement model.
So is Clay County's plan, you said that it was already accepted by the state. What would be the difference between their plan and our plan?
Not likely different. So they've collected information from the cities on what they were trying to do, and to give you some glimpse into that process, we did actually look over what some of the cities were trying to do, and some of their expenses were not eligible. So we had to go back and tell them to actually restructure their requests to make them eligible. There happened to be one city that was attempting to build a police precinct, and that's a very hard nexus to actually draw a line between the COVID-19 and the necessity behind that. So it's just a matter of putting those guardrails on. This has a clear nexus to COVID-19 and prudent, and it can be accomplished by the end of the year. So just offering that guidance up front to the cities, I think, is beneficial, so that they're not proposing things that are going to fall in the gray. So I wouldn't say that what you're proposing would look any different. I think that there are 6 components of a spending plan. It's your expenses, cost incurred to date. It's your expenses through the end of the year. And I mean actual constitutional and county expenditures through the end of the year. And then it's the cities, and you're sharing funds with them if you do want to share funding with schools. And then if you want to share funding with nonprofit organizations and social services providers, and if you want to share funding with businesses. Those are really the 6 components that I see as part of a spending plan. And we can give you the framework of what that might actually look like. And it might help actually, start penciling in numbers if you want to do that.
Could you send me a copy of Clay County's that's been approved, please?
I don't know that I can do that. I'll actually have to check with Clay County, because that plan was between the state and Clay Counties and the state's attorney. So it may be privileged. I just need to get a sense of, because I don't believe that they've brought it in front of the commissioners yet.
Oh, okay. So it's only been approved by the state. It's not been adopted by the county?
That's right.
Huh. When are they looking to adopt theirs?
I probably will know more on Monday.
Okay. When it's adopted, can you send us a copy of it?
Sure. Yeah, I think it becomes a matter of public record, so I'm happy to share.
Yeah. I'm good.
Okay, well, thank you. Is there any comment from County Administrator Suggs at this point?
No, sir. We're just taking notes here. We'll work through with Widow Ryan and Matthew and get information gathered up that we need to do on this end to move forward with the motion.
Okay, well, with the motion that passed today, and I think we also need to start working on the logistics and the mechanics of getting this program out on the street that the commission voted for today, and as quickly as possible.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, thank you. Is any comments today from our county attorney, Rich Commando?
No, Mr. Chair, thank you.
All right, thank you, Rich. Are there any commissioner requests before we adjourn the meeting? Okay, you want me to go commissioner to commissioner? Commissioner Goddard?
I have none.
Commissioner Pickens?
I just want to make sure all the commissioners are aware, when this thing is going to be rolled out, how it's going to be advertised. I just want to make sure before it hits the streets that we know.
Okay, can you make sure of that, Administrator Suggs, that you kind of give us an idea of what's going on in the timeline of it?
Absolutely, we'll work, once we put our plan together, we'll reach out to each individual commissioner and make sure everybody's aware when we roll this out. And we'll also illustrate at that time how we plan on rolling that.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Harvey, do you have anything further?
No, I don't, Mr. Chairman. I just want to say thank you to everybody and look forward to having more discussions because I know we all probably have more things we want to talk about, but this was a great first step today. And Mr. Chairman, I appreciate your leadership on that.
Okay, Commissioner Rawls, do you have anything further, sir?
Just that when this is rolled out, I assume it's going to be virtual, so we'll have a link that somebody can click on to get the application. If you could just, let the commissioners know so we can put it on our social media, that would be another way we can help get this out to the public.
Okay, thank you, sir. And just to let the commissioners know before we adjourn, I will call another special meeting if it's at whatever point that we have information to provide the commission that's relevant to this situation or to the spending agreement for the rest of the money. But that's not going to happen in a week. I'm just telling you right now, it's going to take a little time to come up with that plan. And that's why I wanted to try and get this plan out today, because this part of it can go forward. So if there's nothing further to add, the meeting is hereby adjourned.
Have a good week.